You need to leave. Now.
She didn't know who he was. She didn't care. She straightened her blazer and announced to the entire lobby.
That is what standards look like.
She didn't apologize. She never would. But she had just made the worst mistake of her life. To understand what just happened, we have to go back 3 weeks. To a busboy named Marcus Holloway and a grilled cheese sandwich that changed everything. For 3 weeks straight, a busboy named Marcus Holloway slipped a hot meal out the kitchen door of a 5-star hotel and handed it to a quiet man sitting on the loading dock. A grilled cheese, a cup of black coffee, and whatever fruit hadn't been thrown out yet. 10:15 at night, every night, behind the Caro Field Grand on the corner of Birch and Delancey in downtown Portland, Oregon, Marcus was 24, broke 3 months behind on a car payment for a vehicle that no longer ran. The quiet man wore a black hoodie with a torn cuff and boots that had walked 1,000 miles. Most of the staff thought he was homeless. One of them was about to find out exactly how wrong that was. Here's the part nobody at the Caro Field Grand saw coming. 6 weeks after that first grilled cheese, a private legal team and the regional vice president of a hospitality group flew in unannounced and walked straight through the marble lobby without stopping at the front desk. They were not there for a conference. They were there because of what one man in a torn hoodie had quietly written down. And the woman who had spent 3 weeks humiliating that man in front of guests was about to learn that protocol does not protect you when you've been cruel to the wrong person. But let's go back. Because the cruelty came first, and you need to feel it the way Marcus felt it. It started on a Tuesday in early October. Marcus had taken the late shift at the Caro Field Grand because the late shift paid an extra $1.40 an hour. And $1.40 an hour was the difference between making rent and not. The Caro Field was the kind of place where a single night in a suite cost more than Marcus made in a month. Crystal chandeliers in the lobby, a doorman in a long gray coat with brass buttons, valets who parked luxury sports cars worth more than most people's homes. Marcus cleared plates and carried bins and stayed invisible, which suited him fine. Invisible people don't get fired. The quiet man showed up that first night around 10. Marcus had stepped out the kitchen door to dump a bag of kitchen waste into the dumpster, and there he was, sitting on an overturned milk crate near the loading dock, just looking up at the sky, late 50s, maybe 60. Dark hair going gray, a beard that hadn't been trimmed in a while, a long face with tired eyes. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't even looking at Marcus. He was just sitting there in the cold like the loading dock. Was a perfectly good place to watch the night go by. You can't be back here, Marcus said, not unkindly. If she sees you, it's gonna be a problem. The man turned his head slowly. Who's she? Doesn't matter. Trust me, you don't want to meet her. The man nodded, like that made complete sense and didn't move an inch. Marcus stood there for a second with the trash bag in his hand. The guy didn't smell like trouble. He didn't smell like anything, actually, except cold air and maybe a little motor oil. There was something settled about him, like a man waiting for a bus he was in no hurry to catch. Marcus dumped the trash, went back inside, and came out 2 minutes later with a grilled cheese wrapped in a napkin and a paper cup of coffee. It's gonna get tossed anyway, Marcus said, holding it out. Kitchen makes too much. The man looked at the food, then at Marcus's face, and something in his expression shifted. He didn't grab it. He took it with both hands, careful, like it was worth more than it was. You don't have to do this, he said. I know I don't. Then what? Marcus shrugged. Because somebody should. The man almost smiled. Almost black coffee. You guessed right. Lucky guess. That was it. That was the whole first night. Marcus didn't ask his name and the man didn't offer it. But the next night, the man was there again on the same milk crate, and the next night, and the night after that. By the end of the first week, it had become a thing Marcus didn't think about and couldn't imagine stopping. 10:15, kitchen door, grilled cheese, black coffee. 5 minutes of talk about nothing. The man's name, when he finally gave it, was just John. Marcus figured it probably wasn't and didn't push. John told strange stories. Sitting on that crate with steam rising off the coffee, he'd say things like, "I used to ride a motorcycle from Toronto down to the Mojave just to feel the temperature change." Or, "I knew a stunt rider once who could lay a bike down at 60 and walk away laughing." Marcus would nod and figure the cold had gotten into the old guy's head a little. Harmless. Everybody's got a story they tell to keep warm. The trouble had a name, and the name was Diane Whitlock. Diane was the night operations manager, and she ran the Carrowfield Grand's evening floor, the ways a prison warden runs a yard. Mid-40s blonde hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful, a silk blazer, a tablet she carried everywhere like it was fused to her hand. Diane had a phrase she used at least 4 times a shift. "We have standards." She said it when she sent a busboy home for a scuffed shoe. She said it when she made a housekeeper redo a room that was already clean. And on the 8th night, she said it when she walked out the kitchen door at 10:40 and saw John sitting on the milk crate, eating a grilled cheese. "Absolutely not," Diane said. Her voice didn't rise. It just went flat and cold, which was worse. "Who let this man back here?" Marcus stepped forward before he could think it through. "He's not bothering anybody, ma'am. He just sits out here. He's eating our food on our property at a 5-star establishment." She turned to John. "Sir, you need to leave. This is a private loading area for a luxury hotel, not a soup kitchen." John stood up slowly. He didn't argue. He folded the napkin around the half a sandwich he hadn't finished and held it like he was deciding whether keeping it would be rude. "Sorry to be a problem," he said quietly, and he walked off into the dark down Delancey toward the river. Diane turned her flat eyes on Marcus. "If I see you feeding vagrants behind my hotel again, you'll be looking for a new job. We have standards here. People who can afford to be here expect them. That's the whole point of a place like this." She didn't wait for an answer. She walked back inside, heels clicking on the concrete, like a clock counting down to something. Marcus stood out there alone for a long minute. The dumpster hummed. A car alarm went off somewhere 2 blocks away and stopped. He thought about the way John had said sorry to be a problem, the way a man says it when he said it 10,000 times in his life, and stopped expecting it to change anything. That stuck in Marcus's chest like a splinter. He didn't sleep well that night, and he wasn't entirely sure why. John was back the next night. Of course he was. He didn't go near the loading dock this time. He sat on the curb across the alley, half in shadow, like he understood the new rules and was trying to follow them. Marcus saw him through the kitchen window. He waited until Diane was up front, dealing with a late check-in. Then he slipped out with a sandwich and crossed the alley fast. "You shouldn't be here, man," Marcus said, crouching down. "She'll have me gone. Then I'll go." John took the sandwich. "I don't want to cost you anything." "You're not." Marcus glanced back at the door. "I just don't get why you keep coming back to this exact spot. There's a whole city out there." John looked up at the back of the Carrowfield Grand, all 22 floors of it, lit up gold against the black October sky. For a second, his face did something complicated. "I like this building," he said. "I have for a long time." Then he looked at Marcus. "You're going to be all right. You know that? You've got the thing most people lose. You still see people." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. His bus came in 20 minutes and he had to go. He left John sitting on the curb with the sandwich and a fresh cup of coffee, and that small kindness was about to cost Marcus everything, and then give him back more than he ever thought he'd have. The next 3 nights, Diane caught him each time. The first time she just stared, made a note on her tablet and said nothing, which frightened Marcus more than yelling would have. The second time she pulled him into the back office and told him he was on a documented verbal warning. The third time, a Friday, she didn't bother with the office. She did it on the floor, in the service corridor, with 2 other staff close enough to hear every word. "You think you're being kind," she said. "You're not. You're being weak. You're undermining everything this property stands for. People pay $1,400 a night to stay here, and they do not pay that to have their luxury experience cheapened by you running a charity out the back door for a man who probably has a record. Her voice never went above conversational. That was the thing about Diane. The cruelty came out smooth and even, dressed up as principal. I am protecting the standard of this hotel. That is my job. You clearly cannot understand that. So let me make it simple. One more time. One more and you are finished here. Marcus felt the heat climb up his neck. He thought about his rent, his dead car, the $312 in his bank account. He almost said, "Yes, ma'am," almost let it go. But he heard himself say, "He's not a record, he's a person." Diane smiled. It was the worst thing Marcus had ever seen a face do. "Everyone's a person, Marcus. That's not the point. The point is, this is not the place for them. Remember that." Saturday night was the moral breaking point, and it happened in front of the whole lobby. It had been raining since noon, cold, hard October rain that came sideways off the river and soaked through anything. At 9:50, John walked into the Carrollfield Grand Lobby through the front doors. Not the loading dock, the front. He was drenched, his hoodie black and heavy with water, his boots leaving prints on the marble. He wasn't begging. He walked in slow and calm, looked around the lobby like he was looking for something or someone, and stood quietly near a pillar, dripping, just out of the way of the foot traffic. The doorman moved toward him. Diane got there first. Sure. Loud now. Loud enough that the couple at the front desk turned, that the businessman in the lobby chair lowered his newspaper, that Marcus, carrying a bin of glassware through the far side of the lobby, froze where he stood. "Sir, you cannot be in here. This is a private hotel. You need to leave immediately." "I'm not staying," John said. His voice was even. "I just came in out of the rain for a minute. I'll go." "You'll go now." Diane stepped closer. "I have asked you nicely. People are trying to enjoy a luxury environment, and you are standing in my lobby soaking wet looking like that. Do you understand how that looks? Do you have any idea what kind of place this is?" And then she did the thing. She reached out and took John by the arm, by the wet sleeve of the hoodie, and she pulled him toward the doors. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to humiliate, just hard enough to make it clear to everyone watching that this man was a thing being removed, not a person being asked. John didn't resist. He let himself be walked across the lobby with everyone watching, and at the door, he gently took his arm back and looked at Diane for a long moment. The lobby had gone completely silent. Chandelier hummed faintly overhead. A single bead of water ran off the hem of his hoodie and tapped onto the marble, and somehow everyone heard it. "You should be careful," John said quietly. He wasn't threatening. He sounded almost sad. "Not because of me. Because of who you'll do this to next, when nobody's filming and nobody famous is watching." He looked over at Marcus across. The lobby gave him a small nod, the kind you give someone you respect. Then he walked out into the rain and was gone. Diane straightened her blazer. "That," she announced to the lobby, to no one, to everyone, "is what standards look like." She turned and saw Marcus standing there with the bin of glasses. "You, office now. You're done." She fired him that night. 11:03 p.m. She made him hand over his name tag and his locker key, and she had a security guard walk him to the door like he'd stolen something, and the last thing she said to him was, "This is what happens. I told you. I have standards." Marcus walked out the front doors of the Carrollfield Grand, into the same rain that had swallowed John an hour before, with no job, no car, $312 to his name, and absolutely no idea that the worst night of his life was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He didn't see John for 9 days. He looked. He walked the loading dock at night even though he didn't work there anymore. He checked the curb across the alley, the bench by the river, the dry spot under the Delancey overpass. Nothing. He started to think maybe John had finally moved on, finally given up on that one building he kept coming back to. And that thought sat heavier on Marcus than losing the job did. He'd lost work before. He'd never lost the feeling that he'd let somebody down. On the 10th day, a Thursday, Marcus's phone rang from a number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer. He was glad for the rest of his life that he did. "Is this Marcus Holloway?" A woman's voice, crisp, professional. "Depends who's asking. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm an attorney. I represent a client who would like to meet with you. He says you'll know him as John. He also says, and I'm quoting him directly here, to tell you the coffee was always good. A pause. Mr. Holloway, are you free tomorrow morning? A car can come to you. Marcus sat down on the edge of his bed. The rain had stopped 2 days ago. The room was very quiet. Who is he? Marcus said. Who's John, really? There was a small silence on the line, the kind people use when they're choosing words. I think, Eleanor Vance said, that's something he'd like to tell you himself. The car that came for him the next morning was not what Marcus expected, because it wasn't a luxury sports car or a black town car with tinted glass. It was a normal silver sedan, and Eleanor Vance drove it herself. And she took him not to a law office, but to a quiet corner cafe, 11 blocks from the Carrowfield Grand. And John was sitting in the back booth. He looked the same long face, same tired kind eyes, the same kind of plain dark jacket. But the beard was trimmed now, and he was clean, and there was something about the way the cafe owner kept glancing over at him, half starstruck and trying not to be. That made the floor tilt under Marcus a little before John even said a word. Sit down, Marcus, John said. Coffee's on me this time. I owe you about 3 weeks' worth. Marcus sat. You're not homeless. No. You were never homeless. No. John turned his coffee cup, a slow quarter turn on the table. I should explain that. You deserve that. He looked up. My name's John, that part's true. People mostly know me by a different one. You'd recognize it. I've been in a lot of movies. And then he said his name, and Marcus felt the whole world rearrange itself in about a second and a half. Because the man he'd been handing grilled cheese sandwiches to off a loading dock for 3 weeks, the man Diane Whitlock had dragged across a marble lobby by a wet sleeve, was Keanu Reeves. Marcus didn't say anything for a long time. The cafe espresso machine hissed. A spoon clinked against ceramic somewhere. Outside, a city bus sighed to a stop and pulled away. I don't understand, Marcus finally said. Why were you out there? Why that hotel? Why the dock? Keanu was quiet for a moment, like he was deciding how much to give. My father knew that building, he said, long before it was the Carrowfield. He worked the night dock there in the 70s, before my time, before everything. He used to tell me he'd sit out on a milk crate on his break and look at the sky and figure out his whole life from down there. He's gone now. I was in Portland for a few weeks, some quiet reasons, family reasons. And I just wanted to sit where he sat. That's all it was at first. I didn't go there to test anybody. I wasn't trying to catch anyone being good or bad. He looked at Marcus. But you find out a lot about a place from the back door. You find out everything, actually. The front door is where people perform. The back is where they tell you who they are. And Diane, Marcus said. And Diane. Keanu's jaw tightened just slightly. She told me who she was on the first night. And then she did it again, louder, every night, to anyone she thought couldn't cost her anything. He turned the cup again. She didn't know who I was. That's the part that matters, Marcus. I don't care what she'd have done if she'd known. I care what she did when she thought I was nobody. That's the only honest test there is. Eleanor Vance opened a leather folder on the table. Inside was a stack of paper. Mr. Holloway, she said, for the last 3 weeks, my client has been making notes. Times, dates, exact words. He has a memory for dialogue that frankly makes my job easy. She slid a page toward Marcus. There's also the matter of who actually owns the building. Marcus stared at her. Who owns the building? It's complicated, Eleanor said. But the short version is that the Carrowfield Grand is held by an ownership group, and a little over 4 years ago, a private investment partnership took a significant stake in that group. My client is a quiet but substantial partner in that investment. He didn't run the hotel. He didn't hire anyone. He genuinely never set foot inside until this month. She let that land. But he is, in a real and documentable sense, one of the people Diane Whitlock works for. She dragged a part owner of her own hotel across the lobby by his sleeve and told the room it was what standards looked like. The cafe was very quiet. Marcus heard his own heartbeat. He heard the bus outside come back the other way. He heard Keanu set his cup down with no sound at all. I don't want this to be about revenge, Keanu said. I need you to hear that part first because of what's coming. I'm not interested in destroying a person. I've watched people get destroyed. It doesn't fix anything. He leaned forward a little. But this isn't about her feelings, and it isn't about mine. It's about everyone she did this to, who couldn't pick up a phone and have a lawyer answer. The dishwasher she made cry in March. The housekeeper she sent home without pay for a stain that was already there. There's a list, Marcus. You're not on the worst part of it. You got off easy compared to some of them, and you still lost your job for handing a stranger a sandwich. So no, this isn't revenge. This is the bill finally arriving. What happened over the next 2 weeks happened the way these things happen when there's documentation, which is to say, quietly, completely, and without anyone shouting. Eleanor Vance's firm sent a formal letter to the hospitality group that managed the Carrowfield Grand. It was not a threatening letter. It didn't need to be. It simply requested, on behalf of an ownership partner, a full review of night shift management practices, attached 14 pages of dated incident notes, and requested interviews with current and former staff. The regional vice president, a man named Gregory Lunn, flew up from the corporate office in Denver the next morning. He did not stop at the front desk. He walked straight through the marble lobby, past the pillow had stood dripping, and he did not look happy. They interviewed the staff in a conference room on the 4th floor over 2 days. And the staff talked. A housekeeper named Brenda Castillo went first. She'd worked the Carrowfield for 6 years. She told them about the time Diane docked her a full shift's pay over a wine stain in a suite that the previous guest had left, and how she'd been too afraid to file a complaint because Diane controlled the schedule, and the schedule controlled whether Brenda's kids ate. She didn't cry until the end, and then she apologized for crying, which is its own kind of evidence about what that woman had done to that room full of people. The second was a line cook named Anthony Reyes, who'd been written up 4 times in 1 year, every single write-up signed by Diane, every single one for something he could prove didn't happen. He'd kept his own records because he'd learned the hard way that nobody up the chain would believe him without them. He slid his own folder across the table next to Keanu's. The numbers matched. The dates matched. The pattern was a straight line. The third was the night doorman, a quiet older man named Walter Briggs, who'd worked the door of that hotel for 19 years and had never once filed a word against anyone. He sat down, folded his hands, and said, "I should have said something a long time ago about how she talks to people when the guests can't hear. I told myself it wasn't my place. I was wrong about that. I watched her put her hands on a man in this lobby and walk him out like garbage, and I knew, the second I saw his face, that he wasn't what she said he was. Not because of who he turned out to be. Because nobody is what she says they are. That's the only thing she's ever consistent about. Through all of it, there was one thing Diane Whitlock never did, and it's the thing you need to understand about people like her, because you will meet them, and this is how you'll know. She never once said she was sorry. They gave her the chance. Gregory Lunn sat across from her in that 4th floor conference room with 14 pages of dated notes and 3 former employees' testimony and a quiet word from legal about who exactly had been standing in her lobby that rainy Saturday night. And he asked her, straight out, whether she wanted to reflect on any of it. And Diane Whitlock straightened her blazer, the same gesture, the exact same gesture she'd made after she dragged Keanu out the door. And she said, "I followed protocol. Every single one of those incidents was a standards issue. I will not apologize for protecting the reputation of a luxury property. If this company no longer wants someone willing to hold the line, that is this company's failure, not mine. I did my job, I'd do it again." She said it with him, sitting 2 floors below her in the lobby. She said it knowing, and she still said it again. Gregory Lunn closed his folder. "That's what I needed to hear," he said. "Not because you're right. Because you've just made my decision very, very simple. Diane Whitlock was terminated for cause 11 days after Keanu Reeves told Marcus his name in a corner cafe. It wasn't dramatic. There was no scene. Security didn't walk her out the way she'd had security walk Marcus out, because that wasn't who the people cleaning up after her were. She was given a box. She was asked for her tablet and her keys. And on her way out through the lobby, past the pillar, she stopped at the front desk and told the night clerk, a kid 2 weeks into the job, that he had folded a stack of welcome cards crookedly, and that this is exactly the kind of thing that destroys property. Then she walked out the front doors of the Carrowfield Grand and never set foot in it again. She doubled down on the way out the door. Some people don't have a bottom. That's not a story beat. That's just true, and it's worth knowing. The fallout didn't stop with her. And that's the part that actually matters, because firing one cruel manager doesn't fix a building. It just removes one cruel manager. The hospitality group brought in an independent review of night operations across all 11 of its West Coast properties. Brenda Castillo got her docked pay back, every dollar of it, plus 4 years of the small thefts nobody had ever bothered to add up before. Anthony Reyes had all 4 write-ups struck from his file and was offered a kitchen lead position, which he took and which he was good at because he always had been. Walter Briggs, the doorman, was asked to help write the new staff conduct standards, and he did. And the first line of the document he helped write reads, "Every person who comes through any door of this hotel, front or back, is a guest until they prove otherwise, and the burden of proof is on us, not on them." That line is real. It's in the binder. A man who stood at a door for 19 years wrote it, after he finally said the thing he should have said years earlier. And that is its own kind of lesson if you want one. Marcus Holloway got his job back. He didn't take it. Keanu offered him something else instead, over coffee at the same cafe a month later. The investment partnership was funding something small and quiet. A fund to cover emergency costs, a missed rent, a dead car, a sudden bill for hourly hospitality workers across the city who lived exactly 1 bad week away from losing everything. They needed somebody to run the intake. Somebody who knew what it felt like to have $312 and a car that didn't start. Somebody who, when a tired person on the other side of a desk told them a story that sounded too strange or too sad to be true, would do the one thing almost nobody does. Believe them first, Keanu said. You can check later, but you start by believing them. That's the whole job, really. Everything else is paperwork. Marcus took it. Here's something he learned in the first 6 months. And it's the thing this whole story is actually about. So listen close because it goes by fast in real life. The people who walked into his small office near the river did not look like anything. They looked tired. They looked plain. They wore work shoes worn down on one side and jackets a season too thin. And every single time Marcus felt the small, ugly reflex to size somebody up by how they looked before they opened their mouth. He thought about a man on a milk crate, behind a 5-star hotel in a torn hoodie, with motor oil on his hands, telling stories nobody believed. And he remembered that he had no idea, none, who anyone really was. Nobody does. That's the point. You never know who you're being unkind to. You only ever know who you are while you're doing it. A year later, almost to the day, Marcus stood at the back of the Carrowfield Grand, on the loading dock by the dumpster, near an overturned milk crate that somebody on staff had quietly stopped throwing away. He wasn't working there. He'd just come by. The fund had served over 900 families in its first year. Brenda Castillo's oldest had started community college. Briggs still worked the door and still gave Marcus the nod, the one you give someone you respect. A young dishwasher came out the kitchen door with a trash bag, saw Marcus standing there in the cold, and got nervous the way you do when somebody you don't recognize is standing somewhere they shouldn't be. You can't really be back here, the kid said. If the manager sees... I know, Marcus said. I used to work here. He looked up at the building, all 22 floors of it, gold against the dark. Somebody taught me something out here once. You want to hear it? The kid shrugged, wary. Be careful who you decide is nobody, Marcus said. You're almost always wrong. And it costs you nothing to be wrong the other way. The kid didn't fully get it. Not yet, but he would. Marcus could see it in the way he stood there a second longer than he had to, turning it over. The bus came. Marcus got on it. Through the window, he watched the back of the Carrowfield Grand slide away. The dock, the dumpster, the milk crate. Nobody threw out anymore. And for just a second, in the cold and the gold light, he could have sworn. He saw a man sitting there looking up at the sky, comfortable in the silence, in no hurry to catch any bus at all. Then the bus turned the corner, and the dock was empty. And what the man had taught him was still there, which is the only place it ever really needed to be. Kindness doesn't need an audience. Dignity isn't something you hand out based on a person's shoes. And the truest measure of who you are is what you do, for the people you're certain can never do anything for you. This is a dramatized story. Names, characters, the Carrowfield Grand, and the events depicted are fictional and created for storytelling purposes. It is not a factual account of any real event, involving any real person. If this story moved you, here's the only thing we'll ask. Think of one person in your life the world treats like they're nobody. Then tomorrow, do the one small thing. The sandwich, the coffee, the eye contact. Tell us in the comments what you'll do, and who taught you that small things were never small. Like this video, subscribe, and stay for the next one, because the next person you underestimate might be the one who changes everything.